Thousands of victims.
It's the call I never thought I would get.
Hundreds of families.
It's your worst nightmare.
A mother and daughter at the center of a massive scheme that's so hard to believe.
And they had coolers in the back that were just body parts.
Yet so tragic and personal for Sandy Wilson.
There were so many people I just didn't even tell.
Sandy is the daughter of Harry and Lillian Peacock. They met when Harry moved to Utah from Florida to work in the oil fields, got married when Lilian was 16, and eventually settled in Colorado.
And my dad was an oil man, and my mom stayed at home most of the time, and they just lived a great life.
10 years ago, in August of 2013, Harry was getting in his truck with a friend to go have coffee when he collapsed. It was a heart attack, and even though he was 86, Sandy was not prepared to lose her dad.
And I remember getting the call from my sister, and she said, Dad passed away. And I'm like, no, this is not happening.
Before he died, Sandy's dad purchased a cremation package so his death wouldn't be a financial burden on his family. His body was supposed to go to the Grand Junction mortuary that made the arrangements, but for some unknown reason, it was sent to be cremated at Sunset Mesa Funeral Home in Montrose, Colorado.
At the funeral, did they have the cremains ready in a box? And that's what you buried?
Sandy's family had a gravesite service followed by a nice luncheon. She spent the night at her mom's house, then left the next day to return home to Utah.
It's the middle of the night. My phone rings, and it's my niece. And she said, Grandma passed away. And I, half asleep, I'm like, wait, what? And she said, yeah, she passed away. And so I hang up, and then I'm thinking, did I dream? I must have dreamed this. This can't even be real. So I called her back, and she said, yeah, it's true.
The shock and sadness of losing one parent was now infinitely more painful, as Sandy's 76-year-old mom was also gone.
I was just really mad. I was mad at my mom because I wanted to have time with her.
Back to Colorado, Sandy and her family went. Because they had just used Sunset Mesa for their dad, they let the funeral home handle their mom's cremation too.
Within a few days, we got the cremains back, and we had a service for my mom, and then tried to go on with our lives, without our parents.
That's exactly what they did, for years in fact. But then in 2017, when Sandy was at Disneyland with her family, her sister called out of the blue.
She said, I've got some bad news for you. I'm sorry that I'm ruining your trip to Disneyland, but the FBI called me, and they think Mom and Dad are victims of this crime where they dismembered people's bodies and sold the body parts.
Sandy was stunned and didn't know how to react. The FBI and Colorado Bureau of Investigators were in the middle of their investigation, and they asked her not to talk about the case with anyone. She held out hope they were wrong. But a few weeks later, as Sandy was in the car, her sister called again.
And she said, you need to pull over, and I need to tell you something. It's been confirmed that Dad's heart and his eyes were sold to a plastination company.
It's your eyes and your heart.
The two most personal things that you could take from my dad, you took. And we don't know what happened to the rest of his body. Mom, they think that they sold her body, like a whole body.
Sandy had so many questions. If they didn't bury her parents' cremains, where were they? And whose did they bury? What happened to her handsome father and beautiful mom?
And to do that to her, I just feel like she would be so embarrassed. She wouldn't want to be the talk of the town. And she became the talk of the town.
That's because of this mother and daughter, Shirley Koch and Megan Hess, the owners of Sunset Mesa Funeral Home. Investigators learned that for at least 8 years, they were selling body parts to foreign countries, plastination companies, or private collections without telling the loved ones of those who had died. It's believed they ran the largest body snatching operation in American history.
We're talking 400 or 500 bodies.
Representative Matt Soper serves in the Colorado legislature, and many of the victims live in his district.
5 times Colorado's Department of Regulatory Affairs sent inspectors to the Sunset Mesa Funeral Home, and 5 times they were turned away because at that time, in order to inspect a funeral home, the state had to have landowner permission.
So let me get this straight. You said that the inspectors could only inspect funeral homes if the owner of the property said, sure, come on in, and gave them permission.
That's correct, yes.
And of course, if you're doing something nefarious or wrong, you're not going to say yes.
No.
At the time, there were no felony laws to arrest Koch and Hess for desecrating and selling bodies, but investigators were able to charge them with mail fraud.
A box was leaking body fluid at the post office. So, yeah, and that's what they ultimately got convicted on, was mail fraud.
You could get a full torso for $1,400.
As prosecutors prepared for trial, Sandy found body part price lists online. In fact, Hess sent this message to a potential buyer: meeting with hospice on the 4th, opening the floodgates of donors. They have 4 or 5 deaths a day. Get ready. How about a deal on full embalmed spines? $950? And over time, Sandy learned more about her parents' remains.
The plastination company, they filled the eyes and the heart with plastic. We don't know if it went to like a university, and we don't know what happened to the rest of his body, and we have no idea where my mom ended up. They think she was sent to another body broker place in Las Vegas. When the FBI got there to raid him, there were buckets and bins of body parts in the back parking lot, but we have no idea where she went from there.
As court proceedings began, Sandy and other victims were there every day. Hess and Koch claimed they never did anything wrong, and the bodies were used for research purposes. But eventually, in July of 2022, both pleaded guilty. Koch was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Hess received 20. They are both appealing their sentences.
Every single victim has said to me, it feels like my loved one died a second time, or they have said it feels like after my loved one passed away, they were murdered.
Soper got legislation passed that makes it a felony to abuse a corpse in Colorado. Another change, state investigators can now go into funeral homes without needing permission from the owners when complaints are filed.
We really want to be transparent in the whole process.
Brian Wood owns Wood Funeral Home in Idaho Falls and says Hess and Koch make funeral homes look bad, but most are good and want to help people who need their services.
Ultimately, people that serve in this industry are doing it because they love to serve and take care of people.
As cremation becomes more popular, many funeral homes are trying to be more open about the process. Wood has this window where people can watch their loved ones be placed in the crematorium.
We'll let them kind of stand here, and if they need a few minutes before we place them to kind of say their goodbyes, they can, and then they'll actually see us load them. And then if they decide they would like to turn the crematorium on, that's what this button is on here.
While Soper has changed laws in Colorado, he says more needs to be done, but at the national level.
Megan Hess and Shirley Koch were not the big fish here. The big fish would be the people who are buying bodies. To fully address this particular issue of public policy, we need Congress to act.
Sandy agrees and is glad the 2 women who caused her family so much pain are now behind bars.
I said there was 2 things that would make me happy. Number 1, I want to see them in cuffs, and if they serve a day in prison, I'm okay with it.
How do you want your parents to be remembered?
They were just such a force in their communities. They were just kind, normal people. I just want people to remember that.
I'm Nate Eaton, EastIdahoNews.com.